All right, welcome back to Edgework on the Hammer Betting Network, a daily live NHL show Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on YouTube as Edgework there. You can find us on Twitter at Edgework Show, and you can find all the picks that are given out on this show in real time and after the fact. See how we've been doing on the season on the Bet Stamp app in the Find Better section as Edgework. Just Alex and I today, so we will go through some of our takeaways, give our best bets, and then let you guys get out of here to go and place those bets yourselves. But Alex, how's it going today?
Yeah, going pretty good. A couple of good games last night on TNT, so it was fun to watch. Also caught a little bit of the World Juniors battle between the U.S. and Canada. Canada, of course, getting the victory there. Connor Bedard still looking absolutely incredible. As a Hawks fan, I'm really hoping that he's wearing a red, black, and white this time next year.
Yeah, that kid is insane. It's watching him is nuts too, because I remember vividly like watching McDavid when he was in the World Juniors, and it's not to diminish anything that he did, and you do have to remember like there are sometimes like these guys are kids, and McDavid at that point was technically like a kid playing in the World Juniors, but just watching Bedard has been a different experience, at least for myself, like being Canadian, being so invested in all of the Canadian games that they're playing, because it's the first time in a while that I've been watching and have felt like on the edge of my seat every single time he's on the ice. And he's 17 years old, and it's like he touches the puck and he just looks lethal. He is he's dominant in the sense of like, I'm going to go out there, and it's not even just I'm going to do it all on my own. It's like I'm going to make a difference every time he goes out on the ice. He's been extremely exciting to watch. I don't know, is there a player for you in the World Juniors that you can remember being like that exciting or that kind of able to be a game breaker?
No, I really can't. And you know, I don't watch that much international hockey, to be honest. Like I said, the last time I followed it probably was when McDavid and you know, the hype machine kind of really got rolling after the World Juniors for him. And of course, we see what kind of a superstar he is now. But Bedard, the poise that he has and his body presence. I mean, he's only 5'9", but he plays larger than he is. And he's, you know, he's a stronger player for his height. Of course, that's going to change over time once he gets into the NHL, but he's still got some growing to do. So if he can put another, 4 inches on, another 25 pounds, with the skill that he has, that he's going to be absolutely electric for years to come. So it's been fun to watch him, and it'll be fun wherever he does land in the NHL. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Certainly is a slam dunk for the number 1 overall pick.
Well, it's funny, too, you say that, like, oh, if he can put on this height, if he can put on this weight, a lot of kids you'd be looking at in the World Juniors, it's like, well, how realistic is that for them to continue to grow at that rate? But he's 17. That's very possible. Very possible. Between 17 to age 21, I grew like 3 inches and put on 40 pounds. So it's like, it's not out of reach for him to be able to grow at a quick rate there. But before we get into some of the NHL stuff, I do want to ask you, at least quickly, did you catch the 2 called back goalie interference calls last night in that game?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So I'm Canadian, you are American. I tried to remove bias when watching it, but there's been a little bit of an uproar online about it. I just want to know what your opinions are on both calls, essentially.
I mean, I jokingly tweeted this that, oh, well, this kind of feels a little fishy with 2 goals called back for the U.S., having the tournament in Canada. But jokes aside, now the first goal was questionable enough to where it's a coin flip. I didn't really mind that. The second goal called back, that one did not seem like interference to me. I thought that was just, a good hardworking play in front of the net, and, it should have been qualified as a good goal. But that first one really changed the dynamic, because that game, that was going to, tie the game up. Canada goes to take the 4-2 lead, and it was never really a shot. Even if that second goal stands and it's 4-3, Canada still had all the momentum on their side there. So it didn't make much difference in the end. And of course, when you look at the final score, but yeah, those were a bit questionable. And I mean, we see them in the NHL all the time too. You're not going to get every call right. So, at the end of the day, you can't really slam it for it. I don't think there was any kind of sabotage at all. Mostly joking when I posted that tweet up. So.
Yeah, the first one for me was more the first one was very questionable for me. I was like, okay, I can understand if they don't call this one back. The one thing I leaned on in that one was like, they call it differently in international hockey, whether you like that or not. Like, I don't think that's goalie interference in the NHL. I think that they let that fly. Then part of the rule is like, was the puck in the blue paint? Well, he didn't go in the blue paint to get it. It was out of the blue paint. So I was like, okay, I could understand. The second one to me, which is kind of funny to hear you say, is like, I think the second one was a little bit more leaning towards, yes, it was goalie interference in my perspective. I think it's one of those ones where like it was under his pad. The ref does have the onus on him if he can't see the puck to blow the whistle in that situation. So like I was kind of leaning a little bit towards even the fact of like, I think he should have just blown the whistle earlier. Like he had it under his pad. That was just my opinion watching it in real time as it was happening. And then watching it back after, I was kind of like, okay, like, yeah, I think this one probably will go, especially given the precedent of the first one when it was like, hey, the first one, which was so questionable, they called back. But that was just kind of where I was at on it. I want to know your opinion, and especially considering it's going on. It's being so controversial online right now with people back and forth about it. But let's get into some of the NHL action. Last night, there were games on the ice, and I know something that stood out to you was in the Anaheim game. One of our co-hosts on the show, actually, Joe Madden, she had tweeted out about the fact that the dad's trip, it was an instant fade for her at this point because it seemed like they were having more fun than focusing on the games themselves. But Anaheim manages to go and shut out Dallas last night. Like, what did you think of that game, and more specifically John Gibson's performance in it?
Well, that's a ballsy call by Joe because I mean the dad's trip, the mom and dad's trip had been 9-2 combined this year amongst NHL teams. So good call by her to fade that. But I mean, Gibson, a guy who's been kind of an auto fade for most of the year, turning in a vintage performance, getting the shutout, making 35 saves. This guy had allowed 10 goals combined in the last two starts. And if he can string together some of these vintage performances, what we saw from him in the first 2-3 years he was in the league, maybe he gets a ticket out of Anaheim and finally gets to play with a good team. You look at his numbers the last 4 years. He's led the league in losses in 3 of the last 4. He's currently leading the league now with 16 losses. He had 11 losses in overtime or a shootout last season. It's not all his fault. This guy has had so much work, and he's played through a bunch of injuries. He was playing through a nagging injury at the beginning of the season. I think if he can go to a contending team, get to sit down and get some legitimate backup minutes, not even be a 1B option, be a true number 2 option, and get healthy, he could be a big factor for a team down the stretch. And I think he's one of those guys that probably needs to get moved maybe even before the deadline so he can get acclimated with the team, get that rest, and then have to come in, maybe make 10, 15 starts late in the year. I think that'd be the biggest thing for him. And I think Anaheim could get a nice return back in making that move.
Yeah, I see here a comment from Connor Hartle. He bet the Lightning and Stars last night, got Brian Elliott and John Gibson. Yeah, that's that's a tough one.
That Elliott one is really rough too, because I was stunned to see him start the night before against Chicago, knowing he had a 10-4 record against the Wild. He had played them often when he was a member of the St. Louis Blues. So of course Vasilevsky goes down with illness and he has to play back-to-back starts. But I mean, he didn't have much work to do in Chicago. I figured he'd be sharp enough, but that was just a great game. We almost saw the goal of the decade potentially by Kirill Kaprizov. I mean, this thing hits the post a quarter of an inch the other way. It goes in. That between the leg shot would have been on the highlight reels for years and years to come. That kid's got a lot of talent. I think he will get one of those big goals at some point.
Yeah, Kirill Kaprizov is actually insane. He is a very, very fun player to watch. But just kind of to touch on the John Gibson thing quickly, kind of have a follow-up question for you on that. Over the past couple of seasons, his reputation has kind of taken a hit. You touch on some of the stats and leading in losses and stuff. I think for a little bit of time, it was he was leaned on as like, or looked at as like, oh, he's playing in Anaheim. It's a product of playing in Anaheim. And then I think over the recent development over probably the past year and a half, maybe, has been, okay, yes, this is a product of playing in Anaheim, but he's also not playing that great. If you're looking at John Gibson here, you're a team that's going to trade for him. How much does it concern you that maybe it's not just as much of a product of Anaheim anymore? Maybe he just isn't at that tier. And do you think he can kind of elevate back to that tier beyond that?
Well, that's the thing. It's a two-part thing. Like I said, yeah, him playing in Anaheim, and you look at the decline in his numbers. You look at those numbers he had the first 3-4 seasons. That was a more defensively sound Anaheim team. They weren't winning that many games, but they
Right.
were more defensively sound, especially with their forward play and better blue line. As those guys, kind of faded out, we saw Getzlav and Perry leave, and some of those other stalwarts. That's when his numbers started to decline. And on top of that, logging big minutes and, like I said, playing through injuries. He's a battle tested guy who's played through a lot of injuries. I think all of that combined is really what we've seen this downfall. I don't think it's necessarily bad play from him. More so than it is he's been trying to carry this team on his back for the last almost 10 seasons. And so I think if he gets a chance to rest mentally and not have to be the man, I think that's a good change of pace for him. He definitely needs to change of pace and a change of venue, and I think that's the right role for him. Don't put him back into a number one spot somewhere else. This guy needs, I think, more of a mental break, and that'll help him everywhere else.
Almost kind of in a way like what happened with Fleury last year going to Minnesota, where he goes in under Talbot, who Talbot was playing well with Minnesota, but he wasn't at like the peak level of where he could have been or what they needed in terms of goaltending, and they bring Fleury in to be that tandem option, and ultimately it's like, hey, fight it out and figure out which one of you is going to be the guy, and then Fleury kind of comes in and does so. Yeah, that could be a good option. I guess just even a short question on it, it would be like, you're looking at a guy like Vejmelka in Arizona. If you're a team approaching the trade deadline, you think maybe you need to bolster your goaltending. You're not looking for a number one, but you need to bolster it.
Right.
Would you consider looking at Vejmelka as a trade piece there?
Oh, I certainly would. I think Vejmelka and Gibson are probably two of the top 3 or 4 goalies in this conversation. And I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you're a team, say like the New York Rangers, you're not looking for just a solid number 2 goalie. You want something just for the short term in case something happens to Shesterkin. I would go for a Gibson. If you're a team, say like Minnesota, for example, where you've got Gustafsson playing really well, he won last night. He's won 8 of his last 9 starts. Fleury's an older guy, kind of on the outside looking in. He's not going to stick around forever. And you've got Jesper Wallstedt in the AHL. Maybe you take a shot with a Vejmelka and you flip Fleury, but then you still flip Vejmelka the year after, because that's the thing. You got to juggle with the cap space for a Minnesota team. So there's places, for both of those players, teams that are going to make a playoff run. But I think it kind of depends what your long-term expectations are. If you're a team that you can give Vejmelka and keep him around for 2 or 3 years, that's more likely than if you're looking for a cup run right now. You maybe go for a guy like Gibson and then let him hit the free agency market.
Right, and Connor Hartley saying here too, sucks that they're in the same division, but LA Kings could use the services of Gibson or Vejmelka. Fair enough. Like that's probably a team that could be using
Vejmelka for quick. I think that's a straight up deal. It actually isn't that bad.
Fair enough. I do have something for you for another team, and it's kind of somewhat based on where they're positioned in the standings right now and what they did last year, and then also kind of the injuries that they've had to deal with. And it's how dangerous do you feel that the Colorado Avalanche could still be? They've dealt with the injuries of Landeskog and MacKinnon. You lose Nazem Kadri in the offseason. You lose your goaltender that you went on the run with in Kemper, but you obviously replace him with Georgiev there. Then this team wasn't afraid to make moves at the deadline last year. You go out and they acquire Cogliano and Lehkonen and Josh Manson. Like, they were prepared to improve their team and go all in for it. Now, you do drop some guys, your team changes a little bit naturally, especially with cap and stuff. It's going to happen, but they get back MacKinnon here, and they've been a team that they're sitting just outside of a playoff spot, 1 point back of the Oilers, 2 points back of the Flames in the wild card. Like, do you still look at Colorado as a team that you got to keep your eyes out for, or do you think that this might be one of those years where it's just like, hey, this was a step back, we suffered some injuries, we had a cup hangover? Like, I'm just having a hard time myself evaluating Colorado and what they could be, because I don't think it's been a big drop-off from last year, even despite those injuries.
Right. I mean, the injuries have really been the catalyst for the drop off. It's not just a bad play. Whenever you've seen this team healthy, they played really good hockey. It's just that you have only seen it maybe a half a dozen times this entire season. And some of these injuries are, like I said, bigger than others. Obviously, getting MacKinnon back is massive. But then you turn around and lose Pavel Francouz, who is a solid number 2 goalie. Him and Georgiev have been a great tandem. Now you bring in Jonas Johansson, a guy who has proven he does not have the mettle to stick around in the NHL. Those little things are what can hurt you now, being in the middle of the pack in the Central Division. If they were in first place and all of a sudden they had these injuries, okay, they could weather the storm, still find their way into the postseason, and then be dangerous. But now the fact that they have to work a little bit harder, and there's a lot of teams in that Central, that they got to fight with. Nashville's a pesky team that won't go away.
Right.
Even Chicago on the odd night can give you a battle, but you got to deal with the Dallases, the Winnipegs, the Minnesotas of the world, sitting in 4th or 5th place. And then you look at how loaded the Pacific is. It's an uphill climb for them to try to get back into the postseason. I wouldn't be shocked if they missed it, but I do think if they can get healthy and do enough time and maybe make a move or two at the deadline, they'll be right there in that wild card range. And if they do get into the postseason, they're absolutely lethal because they have that pedigree of winning last year and being a team that can take care of business when they're undervalued.
All right, let's get into our picks for today, give our best bets so we can run through some of those. I'll let you start here. You're looking at one in the Rangers-Habs game here.
Yeah, I'm looking at that team total over 3.5. I laid $1.25 actually with that on the Rangers. I mean, this is a Montreal defense and goaltending unit that's pretty much just been, trash cans and traffic cones right now. I mean, the way that they're giving up goals left and right. You give up, 7 against Florida, and this is a Florida team whose offense hasn't been sparkling all year long. You give up 9 against Washington, and this is a Ranger team. They need that kind of boost. They need those big offensive output games, I think, just to give them confidence and momentum moving forward. They can't rely on Shesterkin to just bail them out and win every game 3-1. I think this is a good confidence booster for the Rangers tonight. Get on the road, get at least 4 goals, if not more, against this really sad Montreal defense. So I like the Rangers team total over.
All right, fair enough. So again, you can track all the picks that are given out on this show on the BetStamp app in the Find Better section as Edgework. We are currently up on the season so far. You can see all the progress that we've made, the pending bets that are in there, everything that gets locked in real time, and the history of the show. Couple rough ones yesterday, but otherwise has been pretty good over the last little while for the Edgework crew, and we are up 19.6 units on the year, 4.9% ROI. So if you've been tailing along with that, you want to see the picks in real time, make sure to head over to BetStamp app. You can find it on there. I've got one here for a game, and it's in the Toronto-Seattle game. I'm going to go with the Leafs puck line -1.5 plus 125. Part of it is just that Leafs team, they're starting to figure out goal scoring, whether it be from just the top guys, those guys being heavy, the top 4 between Nylander, Tavares, Marner, Matthews, but now they're starting to get contributions from the lower ends of their lineup. You're getting contributions from the guys like Pierre Engvall and Kerfoot and even Calle Jarnkrok fitting in. He's on the second line, but more of like a lower down depth piece kind of player. And when we've seen this Leafs team do that, they've been able to put up significant numbers of goals against teams. You're going up against a Seattle team which has some shaky goaltending tonight, so you'd hope that the Leafs are going to be able to put up a bunch of goals against them. And then on the other side of it is that Matt Murray has been very good in net for this Leafs team over the last little while, basically throughout the majority of this season. We saw it in the game against Colorado when they won 6-2. He goes in there, he plays pretty well, and the Leafs team is able to put up a bunch of goals. They managed to win by 4 in that game. You look at the game against St. Louis the other day with Samsonov in net. He's been struggling the last couple of weeks, but this Leafs team still manages to put up 5 against St. Louis. You lose in a shootout. I think you're going to get some goaltending from the Leafs here tonight. I think you're still going to manage to be able to score a bunch of goals. So Leafs puck line -1.5 plus 125 is one of my picks for today.
Yeah, that's not a bad look at all. And when you look at how Toronto, that back and forth game they played, they want to get off to a hot start and play a full 60-minute effort, and that's something that we haven't been able to say about Seattle lately, which is interesting because that was the thing. They were a hardworking, fast-paced team early in the year. That's kind of dropped off a bit. I don't think they've fallen off the map completely. I think they're just going through a blip right now. They'll still be a team that can fight hard in that Pacific Division. But they're going through some
Yeah.
rough times right now. I think Toronto's getting them at the right time.
Yeah, you also kind of need that response out of Toronto here. You're still at home. You just played that home game that was a little bit rough, and then you're kind of looking at this like, all right, like let's bounce back. We had some weird shaky ones. We lost to Arizona the other day or last week, and had to grind one out against St. Louis last week. So looking for a bounce back spot here. I do have a question before we get to your next one here. A question in the chat. Don Schultz saying, Sorrow steals one in Carolina. Call me crazy. Thoughts on that there, Alex?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, Carolina's had a decent track record against Nashville. Saros hasn't really been stealing much of them lately. But we look at, Kochetkov projected to start. He finally kind of laid an egg in his last start. It's the first bad start he's had since he's been up in the NHL. I don't know if he's going to make a habit out of that. So if I had to play it, I would probably look at Carolina, maybe team total over. I would look at anything Carolina related, not so much Nashville side.
Fair enough. All right, and then you do have some more best bets, so we'll get to those. Let's hear about the one in the Boston Bruins LA Kings game. Like this Boston team, they just continue to roll. But every time I look at the standings, I don't unfortunately get to follow LA, watch their games as much as I'd probably like to, just based on the time of their games and everything else that's going on. But like this LA team, they're only 4 points back of Vegas. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. They continue to win games. The only number that just kind of like grabs my attention every time is they're a -5 goal differential on the season. And I think a lot of that is, as you've kind of even mentioned here when we're talking about teams that are looking for goalies, is like they just haven't really got it consistently throughout this season so far. So they kind of have to outscore their problems. And then sometimes if you're going to lose a game, you're going to give up a whole bunch. You're not going to be able to fight back. But they're scrappy. They're finding ways to get points. They're finding ways to win games. What do you have in this Bruins-Kings game tonight?
Yeah, they're like the cardiac kings. That's what I've been calling them lately. 6 of their last 11 games going to overtime. And he said finding ways to win and getting it done with a different cast of characters. Cal Peterson was supposed to be the heir apparent to Jonathan Quick and net. Eventually, he finds himself getting put on waivers, and now he's buried in Ontario. They call up Phoenix Copley, who's been a journeyman in the AHL and NHL for years. And now all of a sudden this guy's red hot. So they ride him and making Quick the backup. So they're finding ways to win with some different guys. And of course, they've been keeping games close. And Boston, when they lose, they don't lose in regulation too often. They tend to lose in overtime. So I like the draw here. I saw it as high as +360 at Caesars. And you look at the series history between these two teams, you've actually had 3 of the last 4 and 5 of the last 8 meetings go to OT. So that history, along with the Kings' recent history in OT, and even Boston, 2 of their last 4 games have gone past 60 minutes. I think that's a good value here. Take that game going past 60 minutes.
Yeah, it is being impressive, like the Bruins' ability to even like if they are losing games, they're still managing to get points out of it. No matter what they're doing, they're just finding ways to continue to build up their lead on the league, and specifically on the Eastern Conference. They're like every time I look, it's like, oh yeah, Boston lost last night. Well, they lost in overtime. They lost in a shoot. Like they just find ways to get points. They make it harder and harder for the teams behind them to catch up. So I like that. I like that play. I like that look there.
And as we get closer into the trade deadline, of course, after the trade deadline is when it really ramps up, you want to start looking for these regulation draws, because you'll see a lot of teams, especially if you're looking at, they're within the same conference, not necessarily battling each other for space. You'll tend to see teams just kind of, if it's 2-2 or it's 3-3 with about 5.5 minutes left in the third period, they're going to put the brakes on. They're not going to risk making a mistake, giving up a goal, and then coming out of there with 0 points. You're going to see the pace slow down tremendously, and you'll see a lot of games going to overtime. You can cash some big numbers, talking about, +320 to anywhere as high as +400 on a given night. So definitely look at those more and more as we get closer to playoff positioning time in February, March, and April.
All right, and then you got another best bet here in the St. Louis or I have a best bet here, in the St. Louis, New Jersey game. I'm going to take the St. Louis Blues money line in this one against New Jersey. Part of this for me is a lot of times when you see star players go down, you get players below them who step up, and you have short spurts of time to capitalize on the fact that those guys, that team will rally around that despite injuries or somebody big going down. It's usually not sustained. It's something that over a longer period of time can kind of drop off. But you're looking at St. Louis here tonight, and they're plus 164 against New Jersey. This New Jersey team, to me, a lot of this has to do with just like numbers in terms of where you get on either side and where you can find best prices in this one. You can find a bunch of 160s hanging around for St. Louis, but St. Louis right now, like, they're in a weird spot. They're kind of just outside the playoffs in the West. That Western Conference hasn't been that great, but you drop O'Reilly, you drop Tarasenko, and then you see in the game against Toronto the other night, guys like Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, they step up and they start to fill in some of those roles. And sometimes it's just like you get leaned on a little bit in those positions. You kind of have to be forced to step up and elevate your game. I think we kind of see that out of some of these St. Louis guys. And the other side of it is, I just don't have as much faith in New Jersey right now. They just haven't been that great recently. They are 3-6-1 in their last 10, and I think that this could be a spot where, and even just going off numbers in the game, I like the odds on this one. I like kind of what you're seeing on either side. I like St. Louis to maybe upset the Devils, or like upset the Devils here tonight. And yeah, Don Schultz even mentioning New Jersey on a back-to-back as well. Yeah. So I like that spot, but we'll see.
No, I'm right there with you. I actually got plus 160 with that this morning as well. A possible Mackenzie Blackwood sighting. So that's something worth fading. And also looking at just the history, Blues have won 8 of the last 11 meetings in New Jersey, 16 of the last 21 meetings overall. So a lot of factors line up here. I like St. Louis to get the job done tonight as well.
All right. Do you have any player props that you like for tonight?
No, I was looking at Stefan Nason for Carolina. I saw his goal, anytime goals at plus 225. That's the closest thing I probably take a shot with. This is the first time since mid-December where he's gone back-to-back games without a goal. This guy's been getting a lot of solid ice time, especially on the power play. I'd take maybe a small flyer with him, plus 225 to get a goal anytime.
All right. Well, if you like plus 225, you're gonna love plus 240. I'm seeing that on PointsBet here, so we'll lock that in. I do have one. This is gonna be. I'm gonna might take some flack for today's show, but this is the first time I've been Leafs heavy on any of the shows I think we've done the entire year. But I'm going with John Tavares anytime goal in this one. You can find it at plus 205 at Caesars. He's performing below right now his expected goals on the season. His shooting percentage below where he typically is at. He is just right now, he's been playing a little bit slower over the past couple of games, and I think that you're going to start to see that turn around. That cannot sustain playing with Mitch Marner with the level of excitement and energy that he plays with, and then combine that with the fact that John Tavares is the net front guy on the Leafs' #1 power play unit, whether it be from tips in front of the net or burying rebounds from shots created from Nylander and Matthews, and even Bunting at this point, who are shooting at high rates. Like, they're just putting out high clips of numbers of shots on goal. Tavares could be in a prime position to capitalize on something like that on a power play position, but I wouldn't lean towards a power play point for him necessarily. I would more just go for the anytime goal scorer in the game, plus 205 for John Tavares, anytime goal scorer in tonight's game. That's my best player prop for tonight.
Nice. That's solid.
All right, we do have a question in the chat here, so we'll get to this quickly. Don Schultz, or I guess not necessarily a question, but your opinions on this before we go. I like Arizona in Philly tonight also, he says. Do you have any thoughts on that game?
That's a tough one. I don't feel comfortable laying a price with Philly. Arizona's been scrappy all year, but that's one I won't touch, especially in a big card like this. There's other spots I'll lay more, but if I had to play a side, it would be Arizona. Certainly wouldn't be laying nearly $1.50 with Philly right now.
I would. I'm on the same page with that one. That's I wouldn't really touch that. That might just be like a watch and see if there's any carnage kind of game for me, and just see if there's any storylines that come out of it, and not necessarily have any financial.
Maybe a good live over spot if you see good pace and tempo but no scoring. Wait for that number to drop down to like around 5.5, and then that game could open up.
All right, fair enough. And Jordan Moso saying Carter Hart in for Philly. So Thank you to everyone who tuned in here today. Alex, appreciate you hopping on here with me. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure to subscribe to the Edgework YouTube channel. You can also turn on notifications there by clicking that bell. You will get notified every time that we go live, Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. If you missed the show, you just caught the end of it, you can watch it back on YouTube, or you can find us on all podcasting platforms as Edgework. As well, you can find us on Twitter so you can see when we will be going live as Edgework Show. And you can track all the picks that are given out on this show on the BetStamp app as Edgework in the Find Betters section. Good luck on your bets tonight, everybody. Alex, I appreciate you hopping on here. Good luck with your bets tonight, and I will see you tomorrow, and we'll see everyone back here on the Edgework Show on the Edgework YouTube channel tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time.
All right, later, y'all.